Welcome to our Under the Hood of Wellbeing event. I couldn't be more thrilled to be having this conversation today. It's a really important conversation. It is incredibly topical as it relates to all of us living in the United States, our well-being, and of course, it impacts ex-US all the time anyway, but there's like sort of an extra level, if you will, in the United States. So I'm really happy to be having this conversation. And I'm really honored to have these four incredible panelists with us, really taking a look and getting under the hood of well-being. Last month was under the hood of wellness and mental wellness, which is a very active state, whereas well-being is more sitting and in the being, more sedate state. So it's probably more introspective, if you will. And I think that we have four incredible women who have not just are experts in their fields, but also have lived experiences that I believe will be invaluable in sharing. I wanted to just say, if anyone has any questions, please put them into your chat, and Amy will be facilitating the Q&A at the end, and we will begin if everyone's good.
Great.
So I will start with the introductions, and as I said, I'm thrilled. For anyone who's come, and I'm just looking now up at Dale and Dixie, who are part of last month's Under the Hood of Mental Wellness. These are really important curated conversations, and we bring in experts in different capacities. And Dr. Stacy Feiner, who's done one previously, to look at different angles on a subject so that we're not looking 3D, we're not in an echo chamber, but we're looking at the many facets of said subject. So today it'll be mental well-being, and I'm going to start by introducing the incredible Dr. Kimberly Gordon, and she's a double board certified psychiatrist specializing in adolescent and adult mental health. And I think incredibly, she's going to highlight the role of health equity. She's a health equity consultant on top of her role as a psychiatrist. She also is a coach, and she does radical storytelling as part of her overarching picture. And so I think that, she does that to transform how we look at mental health. So I think Dr. Kimberly is going to get under the hood of well-being in this context, using all of your arsenal, looking at it from everything from the health equity and all perspectives. So welcome, and thank you again for joining us. Next up, bottom right, is Amanda Antunes. She is a registered nutritionist and holistic health advocate. When I met Amanda, I was really impressed because she's dedicated to helping individuals achieve holistic health through mindful eating. So the way, and also with a passion for conscious eating. So Amanda brings expertise on how the food we consume impacts our physical and our mental well-being. So I think that will be a very interesting perspective. And she had come in through Amy, which is fantastic. Next up is top right corner is Varda Messer. Varda is the co-founder of Aquafit Intimates, and Varda's personal experience inspired her to innovate solutions and this is again about lived experience, that prioritize women's intimate health. And that's a subject that we aren't very comfortable talking about. So I think it's fantastic. Her story reveals how deeply personal challenges can lead to transformative approaches to well-being. So I think it's going to be very interesting to get into that other sort of dimension, which is the intimacy of well-being and what that means. And lastly, Dr. Priyanka, and I am going to not pronounce her last name incorrectly. It's a complicated one, but she's a clinical psychologist committed to helping individuals, couples, and families lead more balanced, fulfilling lives. Her expertise lies in integrating evidence-based therapeutic approaches with mindfulness, trauma-informed care, and culturally responsive practices. I've interviewed almost all of them, but recently Dr. Priyanka, and I was fascinated with her time in dealing with 9/11, the PTSD, the post-traumatic, and really dealing with healing and coming out on the other side and doing the work she's doing today. So all of them will bring this beautiful, unique expertise and experience to this conversation today. So if it's okay, I'm going to get going. We're going to start broad with Dr. Kim Gordon, and she's going to, I love this subject, which was which is really focused on, as I said, wellness versus well-being. And so I want Dr. Gordon to open up with, how do we define true well-being, and what role does mental health play in achieving it?
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to share. And I've been thinking about this over the week because as you said earlier, we're in a difficult time in America. And so the ideal of well-being may be something that folks here are really thinking about. But there are a couple definitions for mental wellness, well-being, mental health that I think that would be interesting for you guys to know about. And the definition that I love the most is coming from the World Health Organization, WHO, their definition of mental health and well-being. I think is important for us to not understate. They say that a state of well-being is when an individual can realize their own potential, right? So that self-actualization is such a big part of it, and can cope with normal stresses in their life, and work productively and fruitfully in their environments to affect their community. So I will lead with that this is a community of women who are coming together to do just that, right? To promote well-being for others. But many times when people think about well-being, they're really thinking about it from a multidimensional standpoint. I met with a group of women just the other day, and they told me that wellness for them would be freedom, right? So they looked at an existential type of wellness, freedom to love and express themselves, freedom for financial support and equity in their lives. But if you look at the dimensions that SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, talks about when they talk about well-being, they're actually talking about 8 dimensions: emotional well-being, environmental, financial, intellectual, occupational, physical, social, spiritual. And the one that I think should comes to mind the most in this group together is really the quality of our social connection, right? Developing a sense of connection with, women of all different backgrounds is what we're doing here from different places, helps you understand and appreciate that our well-being is united in a way. We have a collective identity that has to be celebrated, but we also have our differences and different struggles at any given time. And the sense of belonging is such a big part of wellness, right? Feeling like you're connected to others. And that actually helps you expand to have a more grounded purpose and have a sense of a spiritual purpose, because some people find meaning and wellness in their spiritual life. But in any aspect of your well-being, one of the definitions that I love to highlight the most is coming from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. And I'm a part of that council as a medical director in that institute. And they actually talk about well-being with the absence of mental illness, right? So a lot of times when we talk about mental illness or we talk about well-being, we think automatically about mental health, right? But actually here they're saying that a state of positive mental health is when an individual can realize again their own abilities. They can cope with normal stresses in life, and they also can work productively and contribute to their community and have these fulfilling relationships. So I think those definitions is a mouthful, and we can probably talk about it forever. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you for that. And it's interesting to get the definitions versus how we as humans just think and feel and perceive it. And I'm just going to push you and poke you on that. You are this double board certified psychiatrist, and we have all these definitions clinically, but how do you feel as just a human, a woman, a radical storyteller on it?
I'm glad you asked. I talk to women all the time, and I'm a trauma informed psychiatrist. So much of the work I do is with women who've experienced grief and loss, who've had traumatic experiences related to their identities. As a person of color, I certainly have experienced the R word. I'm not going to say it because we're not supposed to say it in the U.S. anymore, but it exists. So all of those traumas, individual or structural or social traumas, oftentimes really impact our well-being. And again, because we are human beings, we all are going to experience some setback, some failure, some disappointment, some type of grief or loss, right? That's just kind of a part of the human condition, which makes us be able to connect with each other and support each other at different times. But it's through radical storytelling, which is what I call it, that people can really express their true self, right? It's nothing like saying your story and feeling validated because another person has experienced that or can resonate. with your truth. And again, it's all about walking in your truth because your authentic voice is the voice that someone is reaching for, looking for, and wanting to be validated about. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad I poked you. And I think it's interesting because I'm going to move to Varda because, as we start to define these areas and spaces, like I think it's interesting looking at well-being holistically, getting the clinical definition, sort of a window into your definition. But as we start to listen and hear from Varda as it relates to, say, intimate well-being, I mean, I know that you're the co-founder of an intimate wellness company. Why it is, talk to us about the definition of intimate well-being, and why is it essential yet often overlooked? As I said earlier when I introduced you, we don't talk about it, and yet it's a very important aspect of women's health.
Okay, so let me start by continuing what Kim said about the mental, and everyone has a story. First of all, the connection between emotional and physical. Okay, there is like a bond between our mind to our physics. And the second one is really the storytelling. I can tell you that in the last 3 years since we launched Aquafit in 2021, I think I spoke to about 2,000 women. They all come to us in the WhatsApp, so it's very easy to communicate. And each one has a story. And each one, after you listen, you understand that the mind and the body is one. And the really the answer to getting to those women and to listen to every story is to let them speak. They open up, and this is the connection, really, because this well-being, this intimacy well-being, is a taboo. Unlike sport or nutrition that Amanda is going to speak about, those things are not like sport, not like nutrition, and not also like mental health. Today it used to be a stigma, but today it's very common to go to mental health. But nobody is actually speaking about their intimacy because it's always linked to sexuality. And once it's linked to sexuality, it's like a big taboo over the head. So what we do, we give like a clear space, a quiet space for everybody to speak up, to say what they think. And then we can understand the issue, and then we can explain the connection between fear, which is the mind, and the body, the physics, the anatomy. And most of the women, I can say 90%, once they understand the linkage between the two, it's like it opens up. And of course, with our product, we have like 95% success. So again, it's the link between the two. And that goes back to you, Kim. It's what you started.
I love that. And thank you for connecting the dots there. I think what's also interesting is that you are giving them that space, creating that space to have those conversations. And so by you made a comment, Varda, probably intentionally, about allowing them to open up, creating these spaces where they can open up. And then you talked about the mind-body connection. And I'm just thinking about how one feels when they open up, their whole body opens up. And so I think that that's brilliant. And so as I think about that, it's kind of interesting. I'm debating, I'm like, we're going to go on to conscious eating, because as we open up and we start to think, how does conscious eating, Amanda, go beyond nutrition to impact really overall mental and emotional well-being?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm already very excited about all the subjects that's been talked about. And while talking about conscious eating, it's very relatable to mindful eating, which I imagine that Dr. Priya with mindfulness also have heard of, which is being aware of how we eat, but not just how we eat, but where our food comes from and how we make our choices, everything that is related to our eating habits. And I guess nowadays everyone is so in autopilot with so many things that we also put eating in autopilot because we're so worried about work and about having to get faster in places, and even the excess of stimulation that we have, that lack we lack a little bit of the intimacy with the food itself and this whole relationship that we should have with it. So what I do in my practice, and I think is very important for us to also stimulate, is really like encouraging to be present in the moment, but not just in the moment of eating, but also being present to all our choices and what is moving us to pick our meals and how we're going to do our shopping and all the things related to our food state. Because I guess many of us also love eating, love food, but we don't appreciate it as much. And this somehow is related to the well-being because it's for a source of pleasure in a way that because we're not present and we're not engaging with it, sometimes we don't feel everything that we could have in a meal and from the foods that are there, not just to nourish us physically, but also emotionally. And also talking about emotional and this relationship with food, I guess it's quite important to share that people that lack a little bit of awareness of their emotions or their body signals, they may mistake those emotions and signals for hunger, and this can lead to emotional eating. And when we are more aware and we're more conscious, not just about our choices, but also about our bodies, we can also develop this like greater awareness that help us to align our choices with our needs and our values and our personal health and also the foods that we actually love and wants to enjoy. So I think it's a combination of the awareness can give us a more balanced state with food and also mindfully.
Thank you for that. I think what's really interesting to me is just it's all about relationships, right? And being conscious. And it's interesting how you commented around awareness, like being aware. It's not just of what you're eating, but it's even in the habits of shopping and what you're buying and thinking about it and like being more thoughtful and intentional with it. And I think sometimes we get so busy with life and so many things. And back to your comment around emotional eating, I don't know, but I'm like, oh, I'm a foodie. I like my food, and and I have to be really mindful about and choiceful about how I eat and the things I do to support my ability. So I think that's a great thing for us to think about as we begin. We're in a different time, if you will. So I think conscious eating and eating for well-being is a great thing. And we're going to move over to Dr. Priyanka. And this goes into a little bit of a different space, which is really about how women, wanting to know about how women develop resilience, emotional resilience in the face of trauma. I mean, you have so much experience, sort of as you shared with us on your podcast, during, PTSD, post-trauma, like 9/11, but looking at it as it relates to trauma, grief, life transitions, and what role does self-awareness play in this process?
I took notes while the other speakers were speaking because I want to comment on and weave in what the others said into how powerful self-awareness can be, because we often see ourselves as human based on how much we are aware of who we are and what we are across situations. And the honest truth is that, I operate as a person and a professional really from the viewpoint of health is more than the absence of symptoms. And health is more than just doing a set of things or believing a set of things or not doing a set of things. It is really about honoring how whole we are. And that's what self-awareness can open up the portal to, which is sort of recognizing if I'm having a difficult life experience, if I've been through a traumatic set of experiences, or even the times that many of us are living through, either directly impacted or indirectly impacted, we're bearing witness to difficulties. We're bearing witness to difficult life experiences. That self-awareness can, I think, help with connecting with what I call channels of human experience. And the way I like to sort of explain that is to start all the way from here, because often people will say, you are what you think. Our thinking is just part of who we are, but our brains and our thinking selves have a lot to contribute. Like today, the intellectual brilliance of everyone here, but we are much more than that. I then go to the heart space, which is where love, joy, awe, inspiration, and who we are as sort of essence of, as people we are, plays out. And then who we live as in our bodies is another critical aspect of us being human and whole. And I think the last one, but not really the last one, is tuning into our bodies, this beautiful container, this vessel, this creation that allows us to experience, hold, metabolize, and process so much. And that's where my experience in doing trauma-focused work, whether with women, whether with individuals, couples, even groups and communities, comes in. Because the moment you can open your eyes through the lens of mindfulness, but through the lens of waking up to all of these channels of experience, you have begun the journey of acknowledging who you are. And you are all of these and more. So a big aspect of self-awareness is to be able to begin that process of tuning into what do I need? Who do I need it from? Who can I lean on? Where do I go to get that? Who is in my corner? What do I need to work on from within me across these channels? And where to go next? And so self-awareness is sort of that step one takes into sort of a portal that can open up so many possibilities, whether it is for trauma and recovery, whether it is dealing with difficult life transitions or different types of mental health symptoms. But I think in today's times, being self-aware of what we need, how we need it, and who we can have in our corner has never been as critical as it feels like today.
Oh, I couldn't agree. Thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more in terms of timeliness of it. But I think it's also very interesting. I go back to that active where, as women, we do so much. We have so much on our shoulders at every life stage, by the way. So whether you have children or not children, every life stage, we are taking on so much because we aren't just who we are and what we do. As your point, we're so much more, but we are, matriarchs of families. We are supporting, we're caregivers, we're all these different things. And so going back and taking that time and creating that space for self-reflection and that journey to self-discovery and self-awareness, I think is critical. And I think what's interesting is we're going to move to Dr. Kimberly, who focuses, your focus, Dr. Priyanka, is really on the individual looking within as self-awareness. This question for Dr. Kimberly is around health equity. You're a health equity expert. We really want to understand, how does access or lack thereof, to mental health care shape well-being outcomes, and particularly for marginalized communities? Because this looks at more of a individual. Now we're looking at a global or a collective or community scale, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about equity. And I'll tell you, in my career as a physician and as a psychiatrist, when I went into the profession, I actually thought about equity as it relates to justice and fairness, right? So we're just going to just debunk the myth that many of us are walking in spaces where there just isn't fairness, like there isn't justice almost anywhere, but you can achieve equity when you recognize it from the lens that we all walk into an experience with different resources, but we can walk out of that experience with all the same resources, right? It doesn't mean that we all have the same opportunities or the same, perspectives, but we walk away from it feeling like I have the full potential to actualize my true self, express my true self, or even express, or even to have the opportunity to get the help that is deserving of me, even if I can't afford it, or even if I don't have, the resources that someone else has. Because equity really is about really evening the playing field so that everybody feels like they have the same opportunities, but not necessarily the same privileges, right? Because I think about things from an intersectional lens, oftentimes I'll say, well, well, why can't we just make it, where we knock the fence down? So no fence is there. We all have the same, rights and whatever. But in reality, we know that that may be actually harder to implement than really just recognizing that this person may come with this need and I may have the resource to give it to them. But in an equitable world, if I give them a resource, I actually gain something too, right? Because we usually play the zero sum game where if I give you something, I lose something, right? And that's just not really logical thinking. But oftentimes when we go into the conversations around equity that comes up, I was thinking about equity today as it relates to being able to really reconstruct your story, right? To rewrite your story, to rewrite the narrative of your life. If we think about it from an intergenerational perspective, women didn't have the right to vote, right? Women didn't have the right to do a lot of different things, right? And so we're looking at history sort of erasing all the leaps and gains that we had. We've been, and it's still not equitable. Women still don't make the same amount as men for the most part. In certain countries, women don't have opportunities to have time off to take care of their children. I mean, in the U.S., we're really bad for not giving people maternity leave, right? That's not equitable at all. However, what could be equitable is recognizing that every individual have the right to certain things, right? And how we come to getting those things may be different based on our cultural backgrounds, beliefs, all of that. But health equity for me, in a nutshell, is really about making sure that the least of us have the same amount of opportunities as the ones who may have more. And that makes the world a better place for all of us.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. And thank you for sharing around health equity. I'm really curious because, as we go deeper into mental health, like, are you seeing, like, because I appreciate your expertise as the health equity consultant. When you go and you start looking in the mental health care, like, is there any difference or you feel like it's sort of the same as looking at health equity in general?
I don't think there is a difference. I mean, going back to I think somebody made a comment about the body and the mind connection. I think if we start thinking about us as embodied, right? We have the embodied, we have the emotional mind, right? We have that part of us that's embodied. We have the physical embodiment. We have spiritual embodiment. There's just so many dimensions of being embodied and holding space that we have to recognize that mental health equity is just a part of health equity, right? Is actually mental health equity is health equity, and health equity is mental health equity, right? They're the same because you really can't have health if you don't have mental wellness, right? And so I think, our society has made us believe that one can exist without the other. And I think science is actually come to recognize that we can't have one without the other. And in fact, if we ignore one part, the other parts are actually at some point going to start to diminish and lose its value as well. But I do think that there's one part of aspect of us that takes a while to diminish, and that's our soul, right? Our soul kind of just sticks with it. No matter what, the physical health can be falling apart, other parts, but the soul kind of stays intact, which tells us that the higher part of ourself is requiring us to actually bring the body together and make it one unit versus these parts.
I like that. And I'm glad that I asked and dug deeper because I think that your explanation of mental health equity is health equity and health equity is mental health because without one or the other. So I think that that's really, reframing our thinking, or at least my thinking, I'll speak. Varda, I'm curious, as we speak about women and their discomfort or shame discussing intimate well-being, how can we shift that narrative and encourage open conversations?
Okay, so first I want to get back to Kim because she's always arising those interesting things. And we are all different and we are all coming from different backgrounds. And what we are trying at Aquafit is really give access and information, equity to everybody without any stigma, just imagine a world where every woman can access information about her vagina, about her well-being in the most intimate place, okay? And Aquafit is taking this to the next level. We are going to launch our AI for the vagina in, I think, about a month or two, depends if we gain more money. But this is the answer to what you're saying. I don't believe in well-being only for people who can afford it or only for people who are educated. We want to bring the revolution of well-being to each and every woman. And this goes back to what you said, because we know today there is really a lot of women who don't get the answers to the simple questions. And by duplicating me and Rebecca, who is watching us, we can give more answers to each and every woman. Because we know otherwise the taboos are too big. There is no way to educate everybody. And since everybody has a different background, you have to be a listener. You have to be there with an AI that gives answers to each and every different woman, because everybody comes with a different baggage, and everybody has a story to tell, like you say. And first of all, you have to listen, you have to unload them from the baggage, and then you give them the answers. And then they're more open to get the answers and implement it on their well-being. And once they do that, everything is changing. And then you connect the dots between the motion and the physics. And this is a way for a healing, a much better way.
I appreciate that. I really, I like the way you framed it, Varda, really about the conversations, the listening, but also creating those spaces where women can feel comfortable enough to have these conversations, to talk about like sexual wellness or well-being, your intimacy, to your point of it being a taboo topic. So I think that listening, and I mean, we're all so aligned. We have a radical storyteller here. We have a listening. We're going to have a vagina AI tool. I mean, it's just amazing. But I think that's great. And I think it's of course really important. And that's where you begin to let people. The more you listen, the more they talk, and then they talk this way, and then it goes out and out. Amanda, I'm curious. How can we shift from restrictive diets to more intuitive and nourishing relationships with food?
Well, I think restrictive dieting is very related to the diet culture that we see nowadays, and it can relate also to the other topics that we've been talking about, the discomfort and all this seeking for well-being, but somehow the nutrition it's not guided in a more in a wider way to that benefit to most women. So we have the diet culture controlling most of what we see nowadays on social media, on marketing, on even pharmaceutical industries and food companies. Everyone is just promoting this somehow body dissatisfaction and dieting, like you need this, you need that to make you look better or get thinner or anything related to that. We've been seeing this for so many years, but I feel like now it's coming stronger in a way, which is really worrying and sad, to be honest, um, because it relates to this ideal body that goes really far from actual the intuitive and mindful eating that I was talking before as well, because nutrition should be nourishing your body well, but also about self-compassion, because you're taking care of your body, you're not punishing it. And I think that's what diet culture goes really wrong. And I think as a nutritionist, I feel like it's interesting to share as well how caloric restriction can change how our brains and body works, because it does impact our reward system, because increasing the increase in anticipation of food and make us more motivated to eat when we restrict ourselves from those type of foods. So basically, we're restricting ourselves. We're wanting to eat those things even more, and then this can lead to also guilt and compensational behaviors, so it does become quite uncomfortable. When we change to a more intuitive diet and in, when we start having the habits of mindful eating, more conscious and more awareness of what your body actually needs, and also being having good people to guide you, like what I try to do with my clients, for example, to guide them with truthful information so they can be aware of how to eat healthy, how to have a balanced meal, and how to eat in a way that is going to fulfill them and nourish them instead of just counting calories or macros, for example. I think that's a path that can go right in a health way, in a actual being like a health professional. I'm trying to provide healthy bodies, but also in a mental state, because intuitive eating is also about being aware of what your body needs and how to give those nutrients in a way that is pleasurable, but also that is balancing all the physiological instincts that you have. So I guess it's really about questioning why are you choosing the foods that you're choosing, and thinking that food should be actually taking care of yourself and not punishing yourself for it. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. I really appreciate the way you delved into that. And I think what's interesting is connecting it to Priyanka, Dr. Priyanka. I'm looking at you about that self-discovery and that self-awareness. And I think the more self-aware you are, the more you're connecting and more conscious of the things you're doing, hence the conscious eating. So I think that it's so interesting, the interconnectedness of all of this. But I think you go back and you think about it as it relates to the mental health state or the well-being state. It's quite complex, it's really complex. And so I'm curious, Dr. Priyanka, we're going to talk a little bit about like beyond therapy, the other practices you use, like such as mindfulness, movement, nutrition, how they can support mental well-being and help women thrive. Talk about that in terms of your experience, what you do and what you offer.
When I think about the word thriving, I'm thinking of someone who's living a full life. They don't have to have too much. It doesn't have to be bright and blingy and shiny. It doesn't have to be, many posts on social media sort of displaying what one is living like, but true thriving radiates from within outward. And it is a sense of I'm good, I'm okay, I'm happy with my life. While I have good days and I have bad days and I have very sucky days. So some of the practices that I share personally, even with my clients, but also practice myself, are doing things that allow for appreciation of humor, comedy, both cultivating the muscle of humor as well as enjoying and appreciating humor. I think being in groups of people that really foster good feelings within you is so critical. When you and I spoke, I talked about the makeup-less, bra-less sisterhood that I think can be so valuable for women especially. But close friendships, close enriching friendships is definitely something that I think is critical. I also think the ability to allow your body to move freely, which is, I think, something that Varda, you spoke of in sort of an askance way, giving space to the body to move and be free. So drumming circles, dance, whether it's Zumba or just, running like Phoebe from Friends in that I'll never forget episode where she's running in Central Park, completely unencumbered and free. And I think a few other things that resonate for me and that resonate with the idea of thriving are spiritual practice, any contemplative practice that allows us to go within, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's breath work, whether it's a certain form of Buddhism, whatever it may be. But it brings us home to ourselves. And that's one of the best ways to come home to ourselves. And a few others that I really enjoy, that I share, are sort of using travel. using paradigm shifts. People, places, situations allow for deep and big paradigm shifts. And I think a thriving life and a thriving human being can have room for that. Even if you have few resources, being able to step out of your paradigm and step into another paradigm, even if it means getting out of the house, is also what I'm referring to. So when I think of a thriving life, talk therapy after a certain point is limiting and limited. Being able to engage your body in mindful practices like eating and embracing one's femininity and sexuality and identity. And the last thing I will add is using who you are as a human being to potentially give to another, to have and desire to give to another, whether it is one human being or contribute to a cause or champion a cause and help others in any way that you can, I think is something that calls very deeply to me.
That's beautiful. I like that. That's just, there's so much to take in there. While I don't recall the scene with Phoebe running through Central Park and Wild Abandon, I can relate to that feeling of wanting to do that. And I think movement, and that mind body thing is just brilliant. So thank you for that. Dr. Kimberly, you're an expert radical storyteller. You've spoken a tiny bit about it, but I really would like for you to speak about radical storytelling and the power of it in mental health, and how does sharing our stories like help in healing and in transformation?
Yeah, I can't say that I'm the only person that use the language of radical, but I think storytelling is a form of resistance, right? Many women have what I call resistance fatigue, where they've been fighting battles just because of their gender or because of their other identities from day one, right? And oftentimes our stories are, united in a way, but there may be some various parts of it that may make you feel silenced, make you feel like your culture or your identity is not valued or appreciated. And so the part of radical storytelling that's really important is developing that counter narrative, right? Reconstructing the stories that you've been told, that you told yourself internally, and how you process those stories. Really actually coming to appreciate the grief that you feel when you realize as a woman, oh my gosh, the way I've been defining success really isn't helping me at all. I don't even feel good about it, right? I may have a degree or I may have achieved a level of, accomplishments, but did I celebrate those accolades and were I able to process that? And then it also is coming to that. I have like 3 elements of radical storytelling, by the way. Intergenerational stories is a bigger part of my culture, right? As an oral narrator, I'm always telling a personal story to describe what it must feel like to be and walk in my shoes, right? But, we have a story of ancestors, in the African American culture, we always talk about our ancestors and how our ancestors, we're standing on the legacy of our ancestors, but we all are standing on the legacy of our ancestors. So why don't we raise those intergenerational dialogues so that our stories may become more collective in our healing journey? And then also, because we're in a digital age, a part of radical storytelling is making a digital footprint. It's getting out there and letting your authentic voice be heard on your own terms, right? So I decided after experiencing a setback in my career that I was going to rewrite that narrative. I was going to tell the story that was meant to be told about my experience in the workplace and how that was for me. It wasn't imposter syndrome. It was something else. It was resistance fatigue, right? It was really going up those ladders of success, but not necessarily feeling that fulfillment. So with the women I work with, we call it the Empowered Connection Circles. One of the things we're doing is breaking through all of that stuff, all of that trauma, and processing it in a group that's providing collective healing. And the most important part of that comes from that is that self-actualization, where you begin to recognize your unique purposes and gifts and callings and aligning your core values with your belief system, right? What does success mean to Dr. Gordon may be different than what it means to Dr. Priyanka or, the intimate wellness professional Varda or Amanda. It's different, right? But it's all our opportunity to engage in our authentic self and use our voice so that someone else can feel more able and capable of being authentic themselves. So that's what radical storytelling means to me.
And I love that in terms of, just the way you shared that, how it opens other people up in the process. So you sharing a story, as you were describing it, all these notes are coming up in the chat, which I just want to acknowledge that, whether it's advocacy from Rachel or from Lucia talking about the power of using storytelling for negotiation. But I think what's interesting is I have found it in my 30 plus years in business is storytelling is disarming. It disarms people. It opens people up. It allows them to come into a situation and feel safe. And I think, we've been having this conversation about safety. So I just love the power, the radical storytelling as your approach to healing. And really, I do think unearthing and sharing our stories is part of, healing in so many ways. I'm kind of curious, Varda, like, what role does innovation play in advancing intimate well-being? So, I mean, we're talking about storytelling is one way. Innovation can play a part in it. And how is your company Aquafit Intimates helping women feel more empowered in their bodies?
Well, what we did is we really tried to give an innovative solution in the terms of vaginal wellness. What we did is we took science, who is there on the shelf, and we combined into a product that really does all in one. We actually deliver in a gel stick beneficiary ingredients to the vaginal tissues, and at the same time we train the pelvic floor muscles. So actually, a woman gets everything in one thing. So this was the beginning. At 21, we launched with those two products. Those are the products. One is for what is bio for dysbiosis of the vagina, and the other one is for moisturizing of the tissues. And then we understood that really the secret sauce of our company is the fact that we are talking to each and every woman. And we listen to the stories and we give the answers where everybody else is not succeeding, because we first speak with them. Like Kim said, we speak about the mental, the emotional fear, because the vagina is fear or pleasure. And we really work with the women. We listen, we understand, we try to give the solution. So this is our secret sauce. And then we said, okay, what are we going to do to handle all those women who comes from different backgrounds? Everybody asked the question in a different way. So we developed a self-assessment tool to allow every woman to get in, answer a few questions, and get an assessment free of charge. And then we said, okay, 2025, we have to be more advanced. We have to innovate. And this is where I before started to speak about the AI, the vaginal AI, which will give all the answers to each and every woman from different backgrounds with different education, because today people are disconnected. Priyanka spoke about going out, dancing, getting to touch someone, to be in contact with people. This does very good for us, but not everybody is doing that, because today the young people are all connected via the internet. So what we're trying is trying to reach and give the information, because there are questions. There is a demand, and we know women are looking for answers on the internet. So we are trying to engage. Usability is our first name. We're trying to engage the information and the explanation in the various levels, so people can address it and then they can get more confident. Once they understand, they can take care of themselves. They understand the emotional level. In a very simple way, they get the heal for the physics, and then they can open up. It's a process.
Well, and I think, thank you for sharing that. I think what's really interesting about, all of this, but when we're dealing with, say, intimate well-being or an intimate wellness is the physical manifestation, but not disconnecting it from the emotional. I'm looking at the doctor. I'm like, yeah, right. I mean, so I think, when we met first, when I interviewed Rebecca, her co-founder, one of the things that really struck me was the 3,000, I think, conversations you've had with women. Like you are connecting with women, you are listening to them. And I think it doesn't matter, like, take the product off the table. If we hear each other and we really listen and we listen between the lines, that's when well-being has an opportunity to sort of manifest, if you will. And yeah, it's nice that you have a product for that from an intimate level. But if you can be facilitating and enabling those conversations, Dr. Kim has a Kim Answers site as well, not an AI, but I think it's a different type of thing. But I think the thing here is getting back to storytelling and understanding of that, which I think is just fascinating. I'm curious, Amanda, now we're getting into we talked about the innovation as it relates to sexual and intimate wellness. What are some practical changes that women can make in their daily eating habits to really cultivate long-term, I'm saying wellness, but I really mean well-being, or well-being?
Yeah, so I'm gonna change a little bit of what I was thinking on saying this aspect because I feel that is it there's so much connection to our food habits and everything that was talked here tonight. Well, this afternoon for you guys, for me it's tonight. And the first thing would be finding activities that brings joy and pleasure. So we don't always go to food to feel that because food can be quite an easy way out and like escape to emotional discomfort. And if we focus on our daily routines, which even if there are small things like going outside and looking to the sky and like having some breath of fresh air or something that brings you any type of pleasure or a 5 minute meditation, anything that at all that makes you feel a bit of natural dopamine release, I think it's completely positive for a long term also relationship with food because everything is connected in a way. And towards food more related, I would say one thing more as a nutritionist, but I know that it can impact our well-being in our daily routines is not skipping meals so much and not having long period of fasting during the day and restrictions because as much as we tend to value some other things in our lives that are not food, or because we need to work, or because we need to take care of something, someone, kids, and everything that's going on in our lives, um, finding a moment to actually put food as a priority is going to make everything that you do feel completely different because otherwise it just becomes like this snowball of feelings and towards our healthy habits. Sometimes we just don't put as much importance in it as we should, I guess. And then we're going to sleep better, we're going to wake up better the other day, have a balanced breakfast, and I'm sure that having that as easy as it could be, as a good daily habit, can make huge change long term.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, I kind of skip meals, but not because I want to, but just a little bit of control things. I'm a bad girl. But interestingly, just in that regard, just the shift, what I have found is the shift in, say, oatmeal, which has a sweet thing, into avocado or eggs, like just the shift of that could make a difference. And so I appreciate that. Thank you so much for explaining that. But I think what resonated with me most is instead of almost being fixated on the food, get out and do things that bring you joy. I think it was Lucia who commented about getting outdoors, going for a walk or whatever, putting on music, whatever it is. And sometimes in some cases I've heard like, go outdoors, walk, but don't even have music on, be in nature and experience it. So I think that's really great. This is the last question and we'll move into our Q&A. So Dr. Priyanka, this is a small and a big question. So if you could share one piece of advice, but you can share more if you have, on achieving well-being from a mental health perspective, what would it be?
I'm going to go the maximalist route, which is which is my default. One practical piece of advice that I would give to myself, because I resonate with so many women here, even though they have not spoken, but I've been looking at the chats as well, is I invite a conversation for us to have with ourselves and people who can resonate with the ideas that we are not broken, so therefore we don't need to fix ourselves. We are whole to begin with. We just need to tap into that. Just because we're only partially aware of who we are much more than who we believe and are aware of who we are. And the last one is an invitation to go from sort of, I need to do more in order to get more, give more, be more, especially as a woman. I can just be me and I am enough. And sitting in that, whether it is in breathing, whether it is in sitting in the presence of another person or on other people, like some of the circles, Dr. Kim, you spoke about, but just sitting with that recognition and that truth that I'm okay, even if I have bad days, and I'm whole, even if I don't feel it.
Wow. I love that as the ending question and more the ending answer, because we've sort of had a conversation about us as individuals and looking and being enough. And I think the way you answered that, Dr. Priyanka, was really about, the being state of well-being, if you will, the going within, the looking within, and I think as a woman, and there are men in this conversation as well, but often we shoulder so much, and you're right, we have good days and bad days, but being able to say I am enough and I have enough, and really understand that is really, really, it's profound when you do it. But it takes a lot of the other work we've been talking about, this, really doing the work, looking at it. And it's, as I look at, Dr. Kim, and thinking about our conversation around health equity and mental health equity, because we can look within and stuff, but we're still part of a greater whole. We're still part of communities. We're still part of, countries. Maybe we might not even like our countries at the moment. We're still part of, and yeah, I just went public with that one. And we're still part of cultures and a global world. And I think it's a really tricky. I think it's important to go and do that self work and really embody self and understand that for mental well-being. But then we can't kind of ignore what exists outside of us. And I think it's a really interesting. I think it's an interesting note to leave on. I'm going to hand it over to Amy. I would love to facilitate Q&A, and Amy, I'm going to bring you up here.
Can I comment just for a second, Brianna? I want to lower it down to the everyday life and every woman and talk about submission and shame, because out of the 3,000 women that are our clients, what comes out is submission and shame. And I'm sure you can relate to this, Kim and Priyanka. So when we speak, we try to be very down to earth, because your words are excellent. We can talk about it. This is the level we speak. But down there, like you said, in the real life, it's all about submission and shame at the end of the day. And what we're trying to do in Aquafit is to help those women, 75% of women who are experience things that cause them for submission and shame, to take this up to the next level get the answers, and take care about it.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I put myself on pause. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's a scary thought, just hearing the submission and shame. We know shame's, a universal thing, but I think submission in the context of intimate wellness makes sense to me. But anyway, I'm going to hand it over to Amy, and we would love to take questions.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I'd love to open up the floor for questions. If you have a question, you can raise your Zoom hand. You can drop it into the chat. I'll start with the one that I do see in here and give you all a beat to put your question in if you have one. So Lucia is looking at the Aquafit website. I think she's ready to go in on this one. She says, I'm looking at the Aquafit product on the website. Is this something that needs to be purchased again and again, like monthly? So if you want to share a little bit about the product here.
Yes. So Aquafit is for a use of 2 weeks because it's an intimate gel sticks. And what you do is you train with it. I'm going to just show you the real stuff, okay? And the nice thing about it, as I said, it's flexible, no leaks, no pain, and you actually experience self-penetration by yourself. You train, you dip it into water, you go inside the shower, and you work with it exactly like this for 5 minutes every day. While you're doing the training on the muscle, you actually releasing the beneficial ingredients into the vaginal walls. So 2 weeks, we have a special program to each and every group of women because we take care of young women who usually experience vaginismus, women in their prime ages, postpartum, menopause, of course, and post-cancer.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Or a story? As you know, we're a story sharing platform. So if something came up for you today that you'd like to share about, we'd also love to hear anything that might have hit home or resonated that maybe you've experienced.
I'd like to comment on Priyanka, your very concise voicing of sort of putting yourself in people and places and situations, which I think is really, really resonated. First of all, as an architect, I never thought of just phrasing that psychologically, that that's actually what we work on all the time, right? Is bringing people into situations and places, and I'm curious how the people, places, and situations, how you as a therapist are manifesting that in a communication about an intimate conversation, because that conversation with a person is really not, is in one situation, is in one place, is in one situation, and how do you foster this mind shift and the embodiment of yourself in different situations when you're working with people, not just women, of course.
Thank you for that question. It's no pressure. It's a big question, so I'm going to try. So I'd like to sort of divide the answer into 2 parts. One is a macro view, which is whether it's the times that we're living in, whether it's being of a certain identity, of a certain race, ethnic group, socioeconomic group. We find ourselves inequitably, unfairly so, unjustly so in different situations with people, places, and experiences. And in working with a wide variety of people over the years in my career, this conversation is a very important one. Because irrespective of the people, places, and situations and experiences we might either enter or choose or be voluntold into, we have a voice. So that is often the anchor that the person takes into those particular spaces. And the work then for them is to cultivate either having a voice, exercising a voice, growing their voice, and importantly, being discerning, which is sort of an inner knowing, and combining that inner knowing with outer doing and a certain emotional groundedness and mental clarity of, why am I talking to this person? Why am I in this situation? Do I have to survive it? Do I have to navigate it? Can I thrive in it? Can I leave and come and go as I sort of please? And that transcends sort of, because this is a macro view, it transcends race-based trauma, gender-based trauma, interpersonal trauma, intrapersonal trauma, where you go through a life experience that's traumatic, and you're wrestling with the aftermath. These conversations are also very valuable at a micro level when individuals are in particular situations where they are dealing with certain stressors that they need what we would call coping skills, but I like to call a coping toolkit. In many cases, it's been, for a lot of my clients, a shoebox where they bring the shoebox. It's never empty, but they fill it up because it symbolizes their repertoire. So at a micro level, navigating different situations, people, places, and things acquires a very unique approach. What are your strengths going into the situation? What are your vulnerabilities? How can you be aware, mindful, grounded, so that you can either survive, navigate, or thrive in these situations or with these people or through these experiences?
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka. It's beautiful.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
About I'd like to go back to the VitaFit. Sorry, the Aquafit. So I've been using the Good Clean Love BioNourish for vaginal pain. I'm like aware of the men on this call, and on the one hand, I'm like, I don't really want to say this in front of men. On the other hand, well, they're here, and why not say it in front of men? Like they don't know this stuff. So all right, so I'm just going to say it. So I've been using the gel for pain, and then taking like an ibuprofen just every day, because then if I don't, the pain will get really bad. So I took your quiz while you were all talking, and then it recommended the size medium to large of the Aquafit, that stick you just held up. Okay, so you're saying that is better than just the gel, just applying the gel every night because of that, the muscle training that it's also doing. That's one. So it's going to be a compound question. So that's one question, part one. And then part two is that there's I see that there's like a starter kit, and then a medium kit, and then an advanced kit. So I'm a little confused.
Okay, so I'll explain. There's a lot of information in the website, and I encourage you to read. As to the men in the room, I think one of the things that is important is to understand that the muscles in the vagina are no different from the muscles in our arms. And the same way we take care of our whole body as a whole, the vagina is part. This is the reason why we combine the two, the tissues and the muscles of the vagina. Now, the sizes, usually, I can tell you from my experience and the experience of a woman between the ages of 50 and 65 to 70, our clients, they all use the small medium, because once you enter the menopause phase, you suffer from atrophy. And the most important thing is to maintain a routine of vaginal muscle training, and at the same time deliver beneficial ingredients like hyaluronic acid to the tissues for moisturizing. So I would recommend the small medium. The kit is actually designed to give a 50% discount for women who purchase 2 pieces. We call it a kit. And this completes a whole 1 month of training, because each gel stick is for 2 weeks. So we recommend usually to start with the kit of 2 pieces, because this will give you a 1 month. And looking at all our clients, we know that they report back for relief after 2 to 4 months, and then they enroll in the work with the Aquafit. They see the benefit and they continue.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Dana. I was going to ask a question of Kim. Couldn't figure out how to do how to raise my hand on the Zoom call. But anyhow, okay. So Kim, health equity is a hard sell. I mean, just the name. Like, who gets health equity? Now, let me tell you, in my job, I work to have people understand health equity. But I'm curious, and of course, I'm in the United States, so how do you demystify it for people? How do you break it down so people can really understand it? Let's just first understand it. And then, of course, some people don't care. Some people, so how do you, elevate it and get people to really understand it to the level that they should? And, I was thinking about this, I mean, obviously we can tell stories about health equity, but I think maybe one way is people who weren't aware of the power of health equity, or for them to say, oh my gosh, I went into an ER and I realized there are so many people that are so much more sick than me. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, people have awakenings. So anyway, that's a lot, but I guess really, I'm just going to assume that you've found that it's a hard sell. And if you haven't, that's great. And if you have, how do you deal with it? And just some ideas to break it down and make it more relatable to people that eyes aren't open.
We're living in an interesting time. So I'm already thinking about how can I answer this question the political way, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just answer it the way I would normally answer it. So as you probably know, many of the words that we use in American landscape to describe an issue is based on some older word that we use that we can't use anymore. So we're kind of advancing. So the lexicon around, I would call it DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even health equity has changed over time. So the first thing that Americans have to do, and anybody have to do when they're using words, is recognize the history of the word. How did it come to be? And who was the first person who said the word? And what did it mean to them? And what does it mean to the communities that they actually purport is needed for, right? So if you talk to a person that's marginalized and underserved, the first thing they're going to say is, what the hell is health equity? Just like you did, right? Or if you talk for a person privileged, they're going to say, what the word is health equity? It doesn't exist, right? But the first language that we used when we talked about, actually, we talked about something before that, but we used to talk about disparities. That was the language we used. We would say that it was desperate. Certain people have different ways that they're actually experiencing health, right? And really, when we were saying different ways, we were meaning bad ways, right? We didn't say it was bad, but we said it was different. It was desperate or whatever. And then we went to health inequities. Well, certain people have health inequities, and it's related to maybe access to care. Maybe it's related to, the stigmas around how they perceive care. Maybe it's related to the provider and the patient match. Maybe we just don't have enough providers who understand the culture of the individuals who's seeking help, right? But in reality, when you think about health inequities or health equity, you have to start thinking about the milieu by which people actually experience wellness, right? Where they live, where they work, where they play, the social determinants of health, they say. If you don't have the freedom to love who you want to love, right? If you don't have the freedom to work where you want to work and make the type of income that you want to have, the idea of equity is an aspiration, right? So it's aspirational to have equity because in order for you to have real equity, those things would have to be resolved. Our society would have to say that all children, despite the color of their skin or gender or race, any of that, or sexual orientation, have the right to a happy childhood. And what does a happy childhood look like? We all can imagine what it looks like. Some children never actually achieve that or ever experience that until they can actually maybe do it for themselves, right? So I think when we think about health equity, it is a aspirational thing. It's not necessarily something that anybody believe we can have unless we all decide that everyone has a right to certain things, right? And we live in a society where there is a lot of power and intersectionality of what power looks like. And so I think the term health equity came to be, just to answer your question, is to say that we need to stop calling it health disparities because it's not a health disparity at all. It's actually an inequity, right? And so the people who came up with the term was hoping to remove a term that really was just unfair to people because it made it seem like they were responsible for what was happening to them, right? Like, I'm not responsible for, wars. I don't have that power to decide if a war happened or not, but I may have power as an individual to access care, right? Or to take some ownership of that. I don't know if I'm answering your question completely, but just understand that much of this language is really used to advance something, not necessarily to say that that is the term of the day. So a lot of people ask me, well, how do you feel about the DEI being, we can't use those words anymore? I was like, I absolutely don't care, because the people who created the words actually came in to actually do good, and then someone else co-opted the word and made it something different. And now we're dealing with the tensions around the oppositional camps of what those words actually really mean. Health equity is a freedom, right? It's a freedom question. Do I have a freedom as a woman to, do certain things to my body without someone telling me to do it? I think I should, but political, scene may say not, right? So that's what equity means to me.
Yeah, I've been using health for all, health for all, just sort of,
Right.
but that connectedness. But no, it's just, I mean, obviously I fight for it, but I just find that it's hard for people to understand, especially now. Well, so.
But Donna, I think that that's sort of interesting because from the outside, as an expat looking at the US, this is ridiculous. What should be so complicated that everybody has a corporeal being physically, and they should have equal ability to access care? It's become this notion of, I think that equity means something financial or commercial, and that's where the question comes in. It's so simple what health equity means, right? I have a body, I live in the world, and I need care, and it should be equal for everyone, this access to it. So I think that what Kim is saying is that, yeah, okay, so they're taking a word and making it illegal to say this word. That's ridiculous, first of all. And we're seeing it even in our space, as Varda was mentioning. Companies are taking out of their websites. Companies that address women's health are not using physiologic terms because now they're gendered, right? Well, yeah, a vagina is gendered. Dysbiosis is gendered. Abortions are gendered, right? And so what we're seeing is that this hyper tagging, right? Oh, is that a DAEI, or is it some other anacronyms? From the outside, this is just it's completely nuts. It's completely like, what is so complicated about explaining that people should have equal access to care? I mean, this is so basic, right? So the fact, Donna, that you're in an issue with this it's flabbergasting, right? What?
Well, I should say I work for the government. So I'm in a no-win situation, so between us.
Hang in there, Dana. Hang in there. I want to say something that's kind of related, but off topic a little bit. Over the conversation we had today, it made me think about the 5 dimensions of embodiment, right? Agency, desire, self-attunement, right? All of those things to resist objectification, right? We are, as a whole, embodied. Women, we have our body, our shell, but we also are part of a collective, and many of us are just feeling disembodied in all aspects of our life, from our careers, right? And what those meaning to being a mom or not being a mom, to being a wife or not being a wife. It's just so many elements of objectification. But I think the true attunement comes when you become to recognize that it's not my responsibility. Like, I don't personally think it's my responsibility to make a whole movement of DEI. Like, that's just not my responsibility. But it is my responsibility as a human being to, speak authentically about my situation in the people in my world, right? And no one can take that inalienable right away from me, even if they try, right? It's impossible to really do that. But oftentimes we live in a state of I think I'm gonna use the Varda state, shame, or we say fear
Submission.
or submission, right? Like, really is fear or love. Like, am I going to actually walk in love or am I going to walk in fear? Right? This is two choices. We all have that choice. Our body is kind of created that way, but oftentimes we get so caught up in the fear zone that we forget where love comes from. You know, every movement has to have a revisit. Like America certainly is a country that I'm very proud of, even though today I'm not feeling the love as much. I'm still proud of this country because the one thing I know is true is that it's the people in this country that makes the country and not necessarily, you know, whatever we're seeing now. And I do experience a lot of love. And I do think that people have a lot of fear too, but that is submitting to an ideology or a framework or a way of being without recognizing that we're all the whole, and if one person is hurting, in actuality, the whole body is hurting, right? And because I'm a Christian, I always think about it as the body of Christ. If one part is hurting, the whole thing is hurting. So how can we shame people there? But wherever we are in the conversation around equity, I think is a question that's more existential than we actually think about. And the researchers and the scientists are really struggling. And so I give a shout out to all the people who are really working hard to continue to advance health and science and all of that. I mean, terms like woman, a bit, you can't even get a research proposal out if you put the word woman in it. Like, it's really, maybe the other stuff needs to go away. No, it doesn't. But woman, but guess what? Guess what's not going away in science? Man. They don't have any kind of restrictions with the word man. And I went on a tangent a little bit, but I had to say that. I see.
Right. Dale?
I just wanted to thank everybody for being so open and for being so real about this conversation at this moment in time. And I think that, Elizabeth, when you said, oh, I put it out there, well, we have to put it out there, because if we don't put it out there, who in the world is going to put it out there? And I think that what's so important about today's conversation, for me personally, is in a world where we can feel very, very, very depleted and sometimes really discouraged, and this comes from the eternal optimist, understanding how important it is to take care of ourselves in the ways that each of you has brought to the table as a reminder. And, when we talk about friends and we talk about going through life, I really believe that, as an older person, probably the eldest one among us, I feel very strongly that what worked in my very young youth doesn't work anymore. A version of it might work, or it might work on a Tuesday, but not on a Friday. And so being able to be in the moment, which all of you said, whether it's our emotional health, our sexual health, our relational health, is very important, because then we know what we need, even to have a conversation like this. You need trust, and you need to be able to know that it's okay for me to have these feelings that, Dana, when you're in your office and you're trying to figure out, and how do I do this? What if people don't believe that this is important? Well, many people don't believe this is important. You have to respect a person to be able to know that they deserve equity in anything. If you otherize a person, then you take away respect, and then you don't see them as the same as you. And unfortunately, we're in a moment where people are getting off on otherizing other people and diminishing the other person, which then diminishes the need to give them, to appreciate that we all have the same rights. So I just wanted to thank you all. And Elizabeth, again, I really appreciate what you're doing with gathering women from all over, and men, I know there are men on the call, to talk about things that are so important on a very deep level. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I think that was a beautiful way to close out our event today. That was just such a beautiful way to bring this all together. Always love having you here. And I'll bring this back over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I want to thank the panelists. This has been a really rich conversation. We've gotten very intimate. We've opened up. We've gone on this self-awareness and discovery journey. We've looked at the whole, the community, the collective. And I really appreciate the expertise, as I said, the lived experiences and just the sharing. I think this is amazing. And so I'm very grateful to you. And I'm very grateful to the people who showed up, the women and the men who showed up to hear and to listen. And, I think that there's a lot to take away. And I just want to leave you with one other thing. It's like I came into I've been sitting where Dale is. I'm like the eternal optimist. And I've been sitting in a little bit of a heavier place lately. And so coming into this conversation, this is kind of what I needed. Amanda, this is my nutrition. This is my conscious eating, this conversation. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and hope to see you in March for our Women Making History event. Oh, thank you, Noko. Thank you for coming, everybody. Have a great evening or day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.